Hey everyone, it's Beejel Parmar, COO of FUNancial, and I've done a lot of interviews, but today is very, very special. God, it was several months ago, I was at a mastermind, a very high-level mastermind, a lot of great business leaders there. But one person stood out for me above everybody else. Not that everybody else was any lesser in terms of their person, but it's what he had to say. And it wasn't just his story, it was the conviction of how he said it, where he came from, the space he came from, and what he's able to achieve over the last several years. So without further ado, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us.
Beejel, thank you. I'm so glad to be here, man. This is great.
So let me do a proper formal introduction. And folks, in these interviews, people send you a long bio and a short bio, and there's usually a bio for the quick read. But I would be doing an injustice to Jeff if I just read the short version of his bio. So I'm going to read you the long version. So Jeff, bear with me. You probably know the story, but those listening probably don't. So in 2008, Jeff Lerner was a professional piano player with an injured wrist, facing eviction and divorce, struggling with depression, and almost $500,000 in debt. But however, in the following 10 years that followed, he founded 3 8-figure businesses, lost up to 50 pounds, and got remarried. A turnaround he credits to a unique approach to entrepreneurship called the 3 Ps, which we'll be talking about a little bit more in just a moment. In 2019, he founded ENTRE, which enrolled over 200,000 students in 3 years, and in 2022 was named to the Forbes Business Council. He currently splits his time between ENTRE, podcasting, and publishing free training online. He's also got married, a father to 4 children, never misses a day of work, and still plays the piano every single day. Jeff, awesome. All right, I'm just going to get straight into the questions here because I think we have a lot to unpack here.
Sure.
You've described your company as a life design platform. What does that term actually mean, and why do you feel it's important for parents to understand this concept of life design?
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, thanks for having me, and to anybody who's watching or listening to this, I appreciate the opportunity to bend your ear for a moment, and I'll try to make it of great value. And I'm just really grateful also for the work your organization FUNancial is doing. I think it's financial literacy is like how we ever evolved into a world that doesn't teach that to kids is like beyond my comprehension. But the fact that you're doing something about it, I very much appreciate. So yeah, life design, is essentially, we have a core belief. I have a core belief. It is now ENTRE's core belief. It is a core belief now that we've shared with hundreds of thousands of users of our platform. And it's just that life is like this designable thing. We live in a world now where you design everything. If you want to order clothes, you go onto a website and you upload your picture, and you can literally put the clothes on yourself to see how they're going to look. And you can add a lapel, or you can shorten the sleeves, or you can add a pinstripe or whatever. You can design everything. I bought a car. The last car I bought was for my wife. We went online, we designed the car, right? We designed everything. So why not just take this all the way? Let's design our whole life. And I believe that a life is a fundamentally designable thing. The opportunities exist, the technology exists, the knowledge and information exists. It's no longer, locked up behind a collegiate paywall. You don't have to go to MIT to learn how to build a rocket ship. You don't have to go to, heck, you can pass the bar and become a lawyer. You don't even have to go to law school anymore, right? Just buy the test prep. And I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying, the reason this is so important specifically for parents is because it's actually so foreign to most parents. We come out, and I'm 43. I don't want to assume I know how old everyone is, but if if you have kids, in school age kids, let's assume that you're, somewhere, I don't know, at least mid-20s or higher, right? You probably come from an era of history when you were educated. And by the way, this is still how our education system is. The traditional education, formal education, is the school system exists based on the world that was. It's not actually, it is one of the lagging pieces of our culture to actually get updated and modernized for the world that is, and especially for the world that we're heading into. And I see this, I have 4 kids. I have a 19-year-old in college. I have a 17-year-old in high school. I have a 13-year-old in middle school. And I have a almost 6-year-old who's about to start kindergarten, right? So I see the full picture. And honestly, not one of them is being really taught and shown what's possible in the world now. And so for parents, you know, I think a lot of parents, we kind of lean on schools to do some of our job, you know, which is fine. It takes a village, right? But I think in the modern world, as a parent, when you really start to know what's out there and when you start to read the data and understand the trends and recognize that the best paying jobs 10 years from now, they don't even exist today. So there's no way that schools are teaching your kids how to be prepared for the job that they're going to want in 10 years, because those jobs don't even exist because things are moving so much faster. I'll give you a small example that just sort of illustrates the point. Harvard University tried to create a course around Facebook marketing, how to use Facebook as a tool in business. They spent 3 years developing the course. They spent a year just arguing about the syllabus, and then 2 years building out the curriculum. And by the time they rolled out the course, the Facebook platform had already been updated multiple times, and every single thing the course taught was obsolete. And they basically scrapped it and said, we're too monolithic. We move too slow. We can't teach Facebook marketing. If Harvard University cannot teach how to market and advertise with probably the biggest and certainly the most sophisticated marketing and advertising tool in the world, that pretty well illustrates how lethargic school really is now in terms of preparing students for what the future is actually going to hold. And some of that is like, oh, whatever, they'll figure it out. Like things tend to sort themselves out, right? The invisible hand of capitalism and all that. But the tragedy is there's an opportunity cost, right? Where kids could have a life that would be unimaginable to most parents, where like they can have the health that they want. They can be informed about wellness and nutrition, and they can have the good habits because they have time, because there's just so much more flexibility and freedom in the world today because you don't have to, you know, COVID accelerated a lot of these trends, right? But like 3 or 4 years ago, it would have been inconceivable to imagine life without a commute. I've never had a commute. I was a piano player for like 10 years. Then I started marketing on the internet. I became a digital entrepreneur in 2008. I've never had to drive to work. So for me, I'm kind of having this moment of like, see, I told you so. Like this is actually, but even now we're only scratching the surface, right? You know, relationships, learning how to communicate. Like schools, they're not even allowed to teach certain concepts because it would be deemed politically incorrect because it might challenge, like a school's basically worried about, okay, who's the most volatile parent that we have to be careful not to piss off so that they don't complain to the school board and turn it into a whole thing. And so they won't even teach conflict resolution. They won't even teach nonviolent communication. You know, it might conflict with somebody's religious beliefs or something. They won't even teach transactional analysis. There's like all this stuff that allows you to artfully create an amazing quality of life where you have great relationships, great finances, great health. You get to choose your path in this world. And we're coming out of an education system. You know, we talked about you mentioned the 3 Ps. We'll get into that more, but it's at a high level, it's physical, personal, and professional, right? So all school really is, and it was created this way in the 19th century for reasons we can get into if somebody wants to dig into the history of Western education. But it's basically a production engine for a professional outcome, right? 88%, I think it's 88%. It's either 82 or 88. I can't remember if it's a 2 or an 8, but it's over 80% of all college degrees are issued in one of 8 categories. Now, there's hundreds of things people can do. So why is it that between 8 and 9 out of every 10 students are getting a diploma in one of 8 categories? It's because of the job market. It's because those are the jobs and those are the paychecks and those are the slots that we can condition students to be able to plug into and spend the rest of their life, the next 40 years, as a battery that got plugged into the economic machine. And that's what school is, right? Well, there's the personal and there's the physical. And if we approach people holistically, then rather than having to make schooling and child rearing itself into a function of how do I shape my kid to be able to fit into the world, it becomes how do I empower and equip my kid to go out there and create their world. So that's what life design's about for parents.
So that leads into a great next question, which is how? How do you teach people how to design their own life?
Okay. So, we have a fairly simple formula that we've created. And obviously, like all things, right? Like anything that's sort of a doctrine or a philosophy, we could dig into this for days, right? But at the highest level, there's really three concepts to kind of wrap our heads around. And we use the term success. There's really not a perfect word. Is it fulfillment? Is it joy? Is it actualization? Is it manifestation? Is it self-expression? Is it thriving? Is it success? I don't know that there's a perfect word, right? Because unfortunately, kind of new age prosperity culture has unfortunately banged up a lot of these words, and they kind of lost some of their luster. But we use success, and basically we look at the world and say there's three elements to what we call one of the elements is called your success path, right? It's the path that you want to carve for life. Now bear in mind, our education platform, we're only 3.5 years old. We launched we're not even 3 years old technically, because we sold our first course in July of 2019. So we're coming up on 3 years, right? And we've had over 200,000 students. And so most of who we deal with have been adults. But I'll tell you this, it's a whole lot easier to create a success path for a kid than to have to do a lot of cleanup work for an adult who's not happy with their life, who's having a midlife crisis, who hates their job, who, never gets to see their kids, who's frustrated, who's 40 pounds overweight, and their doctor says they have high blood pressure. Like, it's a lot easier to just get it right for the kids, right? I mean, we adults, we have some more work to do. So from a, child perspective, the idea is to actually visualize this path that gets to the life that people want, right? That our child wants. But children don't necessarily have all the context or all the awareness of opportunities and what things mean and the secondary meanings of things. And so like a child can't tell you with perfect accuracy where they want to go and where they want to be in 30 years, right? So our job is to kind of architect this path rather than by saying this is exactly what the path must look like, because that's what some heavy-handed parents do. And that's a lot of what the education system does. They go, look, there's 8 basic paths and you got to choose one. And this is exactly what it needs to look like, right? You're either going to be the student athlete that gets the scholarship, or you're going to be the debate team kid or the mathlete, or the burnout, or there's these archetypes, right? We say, no. Let's start with the first thing is we look at what's called success DNA. And success DNA, I mean, for lack of an easier way to say it, it's just kind of like personality theory. It's like a parent knows their kid's success DNA, right? You know what type of person if they're introverted or extroverted, if they're naturally strong communicators. Are they more verbal? Are they more written? Do they learn auditorily? Do they learn visually? We just know all the stuff about our kids. And so the idea is to try to quantify that though into what we call success DNA and really understand who is this person and what do they actually want out of life? Which again, people fight us sometimes and they're like, but because we've all kind of been taught get your head out of the clouds, right? You can't have it all. It's almost selfish to really get in touch with what you want, because we're supposed to be functional members of society. But the technology and the opportunities exist now that there can be 8 billion unique functional members of society. We don't have to look like each other anymore. And true living, we know this, Maslow's hierarchy, what's at the top? It's self-actualization, right? When every person is fully alive, nobody looks the same, including, by the way, kids not looking like their parents or looking like their parents even want them to look. That's part of it, right? And so your success DNA is kind of like this early, guide stone to which direction to point. And then the way you architect the success path, again, it's a little different for adults, but for kids, it's about putting all the right bumpers in place, right? And we have a concept we'll talk a little more about later. I hope we have more time, but it's to talk about it. It's called the wheel of growth. And it's essentially all the things you put structurally around a child or around any human that determine the set of potentialities for their life. And it's their knowledge, it's their environment, it's their different types of resources. And we break these down further. And then it's their basic set of habits, right? Those are like the four quadrants of the wheel. And those kind of become the bumpers that steer the child through this success path. And then the final piece of the formula. So you have the success DNA, you have the success path that's determined by these bumpers or kind of these constraints. And then you have finally what we call your success vehicles. And these are programs you get involved with, or businesses that you start, or organizations that you join, or the different, the vehicles that carry you down the path, so to speak, faster than you would get there just walking on your own. And so that's, again, there's a lot more to it, and the devil's in the details, but at a high level, that's kind of the three-part mechanism is defining your success DNA, roughly, sort of, again, carving out or structuring your success path, and then identifying specific success vehicles to get you down that path.
Awesome. All right. So there's a lot as parents we can do, and it's sometimes very overwhelming. And where do we start? So what are some of the things that parents can start implementing like today? Like what's one or two things that, coming off this, watching this, they think, okay, what can I do differently as a parent today to start kind of resetting that compass for my children?
Sure. So, I mentioned the wheel of growth. I'm going to say that's probably a little more advanced. I'm thinking of two answers to your question, and I'll say that's like the more advanced one. So we may get to that. But the simplest one, that I think the starting point, certainly the starting point for everything we do, is a really simple, it's a tool. You can think of it as a tool. You can think of it as a framework. And we call it the 3x3 success matrix. And I'm going to start with the first piece of it, because it's basically three elements that each have three elements, right? That's why it's 3x3. It's like three things, and each of the three things has three things. So I'm going to start with just the first one, because honestly, even if somebody's like, I can only handle one thing, just this first one I've seen it change thousands and thousands of lives to just embrace this very first thing I'm about to say. And we actually already mentioned it. It's called the 3 Ps: physical, personal, and professional. And to basically start looking at life and to teach your children, this is like the simplest sort of heuristic or basic, almost like mnemonic device or tool that we could define for people that could be so powerful. They say little hinges swing big doors, right? This is the smallest hinge we could create that could swing the biggest door of a human life. And it's to basically start looking at life and time. And I would say teach our kids to look at life and time as a function of physical, personal, and professional development. And so for a child to simply start to develop the awareness to say, okay, what part of life am I developing right now? Hey, Sonny, like, I saw you outside playing. Like, what do you really think? If you look at your life and the person you're becoming, like what, and obviously you nuance the conversation depending on how their age, right? There's more or less sophisticated ways to have this, but like, hey, what do you think you were really doing out there? Like, were you developing physically? And say, yeah, I was running around and I was winded and I was breathing heavy. Yeah, you were developing yourself physically, right? Physically, you were working on the cardiovascular part of life, right? And and again, depending how old they are, you were improving how your body handles oxygen. This is why it's good to get out of breath, right? Or and then you say, but what about the personal? Was there anything personal going on out there? Yeah, I was playing tag with the neighbor kids and I was making friendships. And how did they make you feel? How did you make them feel? And that can be a lead into a conversation about communication and relationship and sportsmanship or, whatever, right? And then like, okay, I mean, if it's a 5-year-old, we probably don't need to make it about their professional development. But if it's an 18-year-old, say, okay, well, you know, so you were out there playing and maybe you had a coach. Like, how do you feel like your relationship with your coach, or your ability to be coached, or your ability to support your fellow teammates? Or I'm using sports because I just kind of randomly picked that. But do you see how that could translate perhaps into professional context when you get older? And again, it's just using this organization of life into the physical, personal, and professional as a basis for having all of these conversations about how our own children are developing, and you'll find out so much about how they see themselves. So anyway, that's the first three things of the 3x3 success matrix. And the other two, you know, honestly, Beejel, I don't know how we're doing on time. I could go deeper, or do you want me to leave it at that?
I think, you know what, here's what I'll do. I'm going to have you come back and we're going to do a workshop for our parents where we can go a little bit deeper in this concept. Because I think we'll be doing it an injustice if we try and just kind of give it a high level and people have like more confused. So let's do that.
And some visuals. Like if I come back and I can have like a screen share, some visuals, that'll help so much.
I've got two more questions. I really want to kind of get in here real quick. How do you raise, you know, your kids, you know, as an entrepreneur, and what are some of the core values that you hold, you want to pass on to them, that you feel is going to keep them on the straight and narrow?
Yeah, I mean, entrepreneurship. So, you know, we have a very specific way we define entrepreneurship, but fundamentally, entrepreneurship is, I mean, if you look at the historical origins of that term, its most simplified way, it's about making things better, even if you have to rock the boat. Even if you have to crack a few eggs to make an omelet, even if you have to, frankly, piss a few people off, you do it because it's the better way. That's like in its historical origins of the term, entrepreneurship is about reallocating resources in the economy from less productive means to more productive means, right? Like, but at some point that meant that we had to tear down the horse and buggy factory. Well, the buggy factory, they don't manufacture horses. We had to tear down the buggy factory. We had to lay off all the buggy workers because over here we were going to build the car factory and we were going to employ people to build cars, right? Like, and in economics, it's called creative destruction, right? And people want to fight creative destruction because we like the status quo. We like the illusion of comfort and stability that comes from not changing things. But entrepreneurs, man, we get in there and we break stuff. And teaching kids first of all, the discipline of first principles, right? You get up early. You do first things first. You do the most important things in the day first in the day. You have intention. You treat people with kindness based on how you want them to remember that they felt when they interacted with you. Like, you know, there's these first principles that, frankly, they don't teach them in school, right? And those are a huge part of the bedrock of entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship, it's kind of like being an athlete or being a soldier, or it's like you take on more challenge when you choose to be this way in life, which means you have to have a stronger foundation than most people, right? So we start with a foundation. I think personal responsibility is huge. You know, one of the hardest things I think as a society now, we're so addicted to comfort. And we think that and because society has placed such a premium value on comfort, as parents, we feel like we're doing something wrong when we allow our kids to be uncomfortable, or God forbid, we make them uncomfortable. But I'm not sure we don't pay a pretty significant price for that. And I think we're actually seeing that a lot in this world. And so for me, a huge part of it is about the discomfort of personal responsibility. You know, oh, you're having this challenge. What are you going to do about it? Not, oh, let me fix it. Hey, what are you going to do? And it can be, what are we going to do about it? But even we means me supporting you doing what you're going to do about it, right? And me making sure you don't get hurt, or if you need additional resources, maybe we can talk about that. But and the thing is, Because in the world that we're headed into, this is what people, I think, I have a whole theory about this, that basically risk is becoming the new security. And as evolutionary beings, most of us are risk averse, and especially most of us are risk averse by proxy for our kids. We have this adrenaline and cortisol response, and we kind of get scared when we see our kids taking risk, or even when we take risk. But the modern world, like, things are happening so fast and things are so dynamic, and change is so constant now, right? Change is the new constant. And so I actually think, again, this is just my theory, but I actually think the reason that we're starting to have something in society known as the adrenaline junkie, or literally the person that gets a pleasurable sensation from the taking of risk that would seem to scare most people, I actually think that's an early evolutionary indicator that we are shifting as a species based on the way the world is going, where the ability to entertain and tolerate higher and higher levels of risk and have the foundation of personal confidence and personal responsibility to know that the hedge against the risk isn't to run away from it, but it's to build ourselves to be up and ready for it. That's actually where we're going. And again, most of us as parents, we are remnants of what our parents taught us and what their parents taught them and what their parents taught them. We don't realize we are handicapping, a lot of us, our children, for the world that we're already in, and especially that we're heading into. And so to a lot of people, they sort of resist or discourage entrepreneurship because it's riskier. That's holdover thinking. Entrepreneurship, insofar as risk is the new security, entrepreneurship is the new job security. And I want to build my kids to be ready for the world 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, where all the jobs are things that they've never even heard of. You should see the list, and you may have seen it, but for parents, I encourage you, go on Google and actually run a search, jobs that won't be here in 10 years. Half the things we think our kids are going to be doing 10 or 20 years from now, they're not even going to be around anymore. And what they're going to be replaced with, we can't even say. So teaching your child to be a person who solves problems, who seeks more productive solutions, who doesn't shy away from the destruction aspect of creative destruction, that's not just, forging a certain type of person. That's literally teaching survival skills now. And that's why I think that entrepreneurial education is actually the new education. It's the valuable education. Everything else is sort of walking dead on borrowed time.
Exactly 30 years ago, I stepped into an event, like a workshop, for the very first time. Didn't even know such a thing existed going through my university years. And I just had the pleasure of attending one of your live workshops. And the reason I bring that up is because a lot of parents ask me, hey, how do I help my kids? What's the best thing I can do for my kids? And I think we forget that sometimes the best thing we can do for our kids is work on ourselves, right? And I just want to show this. I'm kind of proud of this. That's my little certificate for attending the program. And I'm going to drop a link because, I said 30 years, and I've been to many, many workshops, spent many, many hours in the training room, led many workshops. And my measure of a workshop is, would I send my wife and kids to a workshop? And hand on heart, I would, say absolutely. And as a parent, speaking to parents right now, the best gift we can sometimes give to our kids is to take responsibility for how we show up, because they're looking at us. They're saying, well, you're telling me this. You're telling me to be an A-grade student. You're telling me to be the best student, but I don't see you, my parent, modeling what you're telling me. And that incongruency, I believe, can do a lot of harm to the kids when we don't step into our power, we don't step into our potential, and just expect them to to go through programs and be the best they can be. So I'm going to drop a link for that. But I'm going to end with one final question.
Great.
Where you are in your life right now, Jeff? What's important to you? What's the next most rewarding thing you're gonna work on? Whether it's 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. Where is your heart right now?
So, well, as far as what I'm working on, I mean, ENTRE, this idea of a life design platform that I believe is the future of education. You know, the ability to personalize your educational path, whether it's, you know, remedial for adults or incipient for children. I think I have a lot of work to do, you know. I mean, you know, 10, 20 years, this is a big project. And I love it. I don't feel like I really work a day in my life. So this is what I'm doing. But when I look into my future beyond just my own work, you know, I really like to look at life through the lens of my children. That is my most important job. And I'll say this, and I say this to the, you know, to parents, right? Like you were saying, when you work on yourself, when you take the time, you know, first of all, when you say no to the good and reasonable and socially sanctioned things that you have to say no to, simply to create the space to say yes to some better things. Just that right there can make a profound impact on your children. You know, and for me, it means saying no to a lot of fun social endeavors, even some relationships, some friendships, things that my family could get involved with. You know, I say no to many more things than I say yes to, because I believe that good is the enemy of great. And there's all this good, I'm constantly bombarded with good stuff to do. And I just say no to almost all of it because I want to keep that space for greatness, right? And so then, you know, let's call that step one. And then when you do that, and then you take that space, that newfound bandwidth, and you invest it in not even just investing it in your kids, but you actually invest it in yourself, because your kids, they're going to do what you say right now when you're watching. What they do when you're not watching, you know, anybody's guess. I don't know. Maybe see if you can get access to their private Snapchat account, not the one they show you, but the private one that you don't even know about, or see if you can get access to their Visco account. Most parents don't even know what Visco is, right? That's a layer below Snapchat. It's a layer below the private Snapchat. That's a layer below the public Snapchat. That's a layer below the Finsta, which is the fake Insta. Like you don't know, right? At the end of the day, your shot at influencing your kids is going to be what you do. That's what's going to stick, right? And so when you take that bandwidth and you don't just say, oh, okay, I'm going to invest this in my kids, but you say, I'm going to invest this in myself. I had an example. I'll give you an example. I was on a mastermind call last night we have a mastermind group inside of ENTRE, and there was a gentleman who had actually quit his job because his job was putting him into an untenable situation of basically his mom was sick and he was not able to be a good son to take care of his mother because his work was just giving him no freedom to do so, right? And he had to quit. And what he was saying is, he goes, I thought I was going to seize the opportunity of my job, of not having my job. I thought I was going to quit and I was going to come home and I was going to get up early and I was going to tackle all these projects that I've been putting off and I was going to do all this stuff. And he said, I have been so lost. And he's like, I can hardly get out of bed in the morning. And I said, yeah, because we don't rise to opportunities. We fall to the level of our training. And you had trained to be a good employee. So that's what got you out of bed in the morning. And that's what got you working hard every day, right? It was going down that checklist. But now in the absence of that, you've never trained for how to be this person. And by the way, how scary / illuminating / instructive / hopefully catalyzing for change is it to realize that the person you thought you were was really mostly the person you were for your boss. And then in the absence of that, you haven't actually done the work on yourself to be the person, because your kids know, because your kids, they're not watching you at work. They're watching you at home. And you're teaching them by who you are and how you are when you're at home, how to go out into the world and be in the future. And now you actually get to see in the mirror what it is that they've been already seeing, because they weren't watching you when you were at work. They were watching you right where you are now at home. And he was like, oh crap, I need to work on myself because I'm doing a very poor job of modeling for my kids, especially because, he's part of my mastermind group. He knows where we believe the world is headed. Like, kids are going to have to be hard workers. They're going to have to be, but not like brutishly hard workers. I mean, smart, creative, innovative, adaptive, outside the box thinking hard workers. And it's competitive. There's 8 billion people now. And the thing is, 20, 30 years from now, when you look at all the automation and mechanization and the macroeconomics, we're only going to need a couple 100 million people to run the world. Like, we're not going to need billions and billions of people doing all the jobs on the assembly lines and the factory floors so there's going to basically be a world where a few hundred people that are the smart ones, the creative ones, the innovative ones, the driven ones, the ones that had amazing habits modeled by their parents, they're going to be the ones with all the opportunity, because there's not going to be a demand for the 7 billion other ones. They're going to be hanging out in a 2-bedroom apartment that's paid for by the government, living on, basic sustenance food. Like, I'm not like a dystopian. I can't forecast where the world is headed, but I think as parents, like, we have to be really, really honest with ourselves, and we have to have a really intense sense of urgency that, like, we have got to get it together, and we have got to be excellent, because not what we say, but what we do is the only chance we really have to positively influence our kids to be able to thrive in the world that we're headed towards. And we are up in the night if we think they're getting 1% of that at school.
I'm going to take a deep breath, and I'm going to rename this the most important video parents need to watch, Jeff. So first of all, thank you so much for spending some of your time to kind of impart your wisdom, your experience, and really your passion for, wanting to kind of help parents, tap into this concept of, life design, both for themselves and their children. Because yes, we are living into a very uncertain future, but the most certain thing we can do is work on ourselves. So we'll be dropping links below here on how, to learn more about ENTRE, the great work you're doing with entrepreneurship, your live events, because I really feel that people need to check that out as well. I'm going to invite you back to do a much more in-depth workshop for us to really help parents understand how to start using the 3x3 matrix and the life wheel. So Jeff, once again, thank you so much for joining us. And folks, if you're watching this for the first time, here at Financial Freedom, we've developed courses for kids from 7 to 12 and for teenagers from 13 to 17, teaching them the first principles of entrepreneurship, teaching them the first principles of how to manage money, of why it's important to start investing young. So go to financialfreedom.com, check it out. We have some free training, some free videos, some free courses. And if you like what we're doing, please, become one of our members, and encourage your kids to kind of start working on themselves at all levels. Jeff, once again, thank you so much. And we'll be seeing you real soon. Bye for now.